You're listening to the 95 Podcast from the team at 95 Network, where we host conversations specifically designed to support leaders in small and mid-sized churches.
Well, welcome back to the 95 Podcast. My name's Austin Savage. I'm here with Dale Sellers, and we are your hosts. Dale, what's encouraging you right this moment?
The thought of taking a sabbatical.
I know. When we share this episode, you will be towards the end of your sabbatical. We're recording it before you leave.
Yeah.
But what do you think you're feeling right in the moment today when this is shared? Like, where do you think you're at?
The unknown. I've never done this before. And so it's just the unknown of, shutting down and not doing 95 Network for 40 days is
kind of cool and scary at the same time.
That's a good way of describing it. I mean, I'm excited because I think this is, and the other side of it is, whenever I do something that the Lord specifically I know called me to do, I know He has things for me on the other side that I don't know about. Mm-hmm. And so in my life, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you or not, but I've done 3 40-day fasts where I did not eat anything, just drank juice for 40 days.
Is that like the Daniel fast or something? Is that what that's called?
No, that ain't Daniel. Daniel
Okay.
get a little bit of food.
Okay.
No, this was complete just juice and water for 40 days.
Wow.
And I've done those because they were very specific calling of the Lord. I don't get in on the fast fads. A lot of I don't just join a fast because everybody's doing it. It's a calling to me. And so the sabbatical. And you were part of it that morning when I finally said, "Hey, this must be Jesus." It's a calling. He's called me to do this. And so what I feel like is he said, come away. So as I come away and I hang out on the mountaintop, I know He's got some things for me that I don't know. And so it's really fun to go into it with I'm going to learn some things that I don't know. And He's going to share some things with me that I would not hear in any other setting. Yeah. So there's a lot of expectancy and anticipation, and I did tell you, I think when we did the podcast about it, that I knew there'd be some unexpected blessings, and I've already had someone call up and give us their condo at the beach for a week to start.
Are you serious?
So, totally free. Yeah, just it's really cool. So that's how we're gonna start. We're leaving. Today is what is today? Today is Tuesday. Today's Tuesday. Yeah.
June something.
Yeah, and then this Sunday we'll head to the beach for about 9 or 10 days. Just so that's how it's going to start. I don't know what's going to happen in the middle or the end, but I'm excited about it. So the chance to come away and just shut it down and just let Him talk to me.
Well, Dale, within 1 or 2 weeks of sharing this episode, I'm excited because we'll be recording another one to kind of capture some of what you've learned or heard as you've been on this 40-day sabbatical. So I'm excited for that and to have you back on the show. I mean, you're always on the show, but to have you back with just the two of us and talking about that. So that's going to be a lot of fun. It will be, I'm really excited. So Dale, to get into today's episode, we have a guy named Darrell Stetler on the show, and he reached out to us a little while back. He's a small church pastor in Oklahoma City. And he recently developed a discipleship tool, family of tools really, called New Start Discipleship. And so I'm really excited to have him on the show. And so I'm going to go ahead and welcome him, and we're going to have a great conversation. So Darrell, welcome to the show. It is good to have you.
Hey, it's great to be with y'all. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Darrell, to start this, Dale, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything I had just shut down.
Oh my goodness.
It was just all locked down. So this is really going well today.
This is going well. Do we need to start over just generally?
No,
or are you good?
We're
okay.
Good.
All right. We're cutting back to where we were. So
that's fine.
Darrell, I want to start this conversation off with a big question. Obviously, we are kind of on the back end of the COVID-19 pandemic. You're a small church pastor who had to navigate everything that happened this past year. What was the most difficult part of the last year and a half navigating COVID-19 for you personally?
For me personally, I think that just the way in which my people and my family were stretched. I'm just generally a really flexible person. So I'm pretty, I can give, I believe strongly in blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be broken. But my people,
yeah, I remember that one.
my people have stretched and bent in many ways. And now we're in Oklahoma, so it's not been as long or as severe as some places in terms of shutdown and things like that. But it was a scary time for a lot of people. Mask mandates and shutdowns and things. It was something that kind of freaked people out. We went to drive-in church, and actually our attendance went up during the pandemic, at least the first beginning of it. Because we were doing drive-in church and other churches were shut down and people drove in, Yeah. But it was a hard time where people were stressed, and I went ahead and wore a mask myself because the city asked us to do it here in OKC, and so I had people pretty frustrated about that I was wearing a mask, and then
Really?
Other people, if you don't wear it, then other people are frustrated because you're not wearing it. And so in those kind of ways, it was a hard time to navigate that with grace and to navigate that with patience with your people and understand that they're afraid and they're frustrated and they need to grow through this spiritually. So that was challenging, but we made it through, and I'm really glad to be on the backside of this thing.
Yeah. Do you personally feel like a lot of those like frustrations from both sides came from fear, like on both ends? Do you think that was like the impetus of that?
I do think so. I think that I think that the evangelical movement in America right now is struggling with fear because we are seeing things we've never seen, and some people thought we would never see. And I think that it's a great time to launch out and trust God and rest in Him. But people are struggling to do that, and so I want to help them walk through that, and that's the way I try to think about it myself, is to say I want to help people learn to rest in the Lord and grow in Him even through difficult times.
So before we get too far into this, what are the things you talk about when you say they're beginning to see things they thought they'd never see? Dive into that a little bit.
Well, so a lot of people don't have a good sense of history. This is not the first time that we've had pandemic. We've had that before. It's not the first time we've had lockdowns. It's not the first time we've had mask mandates. There's a picture circulated back during the beginning of the pandemic from the 1918 flu pandemic, where people were carrying placards around that said, wear a mask or go to jail, sort of thing. This isn't new, but a lot of people don't have the perspective and the sense of the story. And so consequently, they're just used to kind of locking in on whatever it was when they were growing up, and Mayberry, and front porch and conversations. And so it kind of freaks people out. And they say, oh, I never thought in America we'd see the day where the government could shut churches down, those kinds of things. It scares people. So it calls for patience on the part of leaders and pastors to keep the sheep from getting too antsy.
Do you think maybe that part of this, that what feeds this is that this is the negative side of social media? This is the negative side of instant everything, whereas that we don't even take time to process. And if you're listening to this podcast and you did not listen to, please go back and listen to the one we did recently with Carl Vaders.
Absolutely.
Because we talked about the impact of that. But do you think that plays into it?
Yeah, and let me echo what you said about the Carl Vaders podcast. Fantastic. Carl's a great guy and has a lot of wisdom for pastors. So I don't think there's any question that the social media dynamic has elevated some voices that make us more fearful and make us more angry. I don't think there's any doubt about that. It used to be that there were certain gatekeepers before you could publish something. And now when you lay your fingers on the keyboard of a laptop, you touch the whole world potentially. And it's just, it's a great equalizer. The problem is that not all voices have equal wisdom. They all have equal access, but not all voices have equal wisdom. And that's a difficult thing, because sometimes the angriest voices are the ones that get amplified and spread the most. And that's a frustrating dynamic right now, but we're going to make it through one way or the other. This didn't surprise Jesus.
That's true. How do you feel like as a leader, your faith has either grown or been challenged as you've had to lead through such difficult circumstances?
Well, I think that my faith overall has deepened and matured, I hope, during this time, because every opportunity, every challenge like this is an opportunity to lead in new ways and learn new things. So I think that in those kind of difficult moments, we get an opportunity to dive deep into truths that sustain us. Truths like the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God has never been more real to me
Amen.
than in the last 12 months and 18
Wow.
months. It's just the idea of the kingdom that Christ rules rightfully, and that his kingdom is growing and increasing in the world, and it will never end, has been so meaningful to me and sustained me through some of these things. That I say, even when it seems like the American evangelical church is in chaos, the kingdom of Christ is not in doubt. And that has sustained me tremendously.
Not at all.
Wow.
So let's do this. We typically ask you your story at the start, but now that we're 10 minutes into it, take a
Why
few
not
minutes
now?
and tell us a little bit about yourself, about being in ministry, the church situation you're in, and then we'll use that as a springboard into really why we have you on today.
Sure. Well, so my story is I'm a pastor. I'm a small church pastor since 2003. And I went from Bible college directly into the church I pastor now. And I had enormous, huge dreams. I kind of sat down in the school library one day and kind of sketched out, let's see, I should be running about 100 by the end of the first year and 200 by the end of the second year, and
risky.
And that's right. And so you understand, like we look back and we laugh now. And I think the Lord was probably chuckling in his heavenly throne back in those days. And so I got out into the real world and then discovered that nobody cared near as much as I did about my dreams and plans. And so
isn't that disappointing?
It is a little bit. And but it's at the same time, when you lay down those things and you get past the surrender and the pain of all that, you find a new joy and a new way of dealing with the world that's I think more sustainable and more realistic. The church did begin to grow. I struggled through a season where I got really distracted and was wound up off into pornography and things like that. I've talked very openly about that with other pastors, and so I don't mind admitting that. And the church grew like a bar of soap for the next 2 or 3 years, and so we
very effective.
Wait a minute.
I've never heard that one either.
Like bars, you just laid a new one on me, brother.
Hey, there we go.
Dale's usually the king of the weird ones.
I'm usually the king. I'm going to use that in the future.
Oh, so glad I could help and be a blessing.
This was worth the whole podcast.
Wow.
So I really turned around and got desperate, seeking for the Lord, and the Lord did some things in my heart that he really needed to do. And I'm really just grateful for that blessed and painful time that he took me through. And by God's grace, I've grown and winning victory and living in integrity, and I'm grateful for that. But I have a wife, and now I have 7 kids. We went from 0 kids to 7 kids.
Wow!
Here in Oklahoma City, yeah, I get that a lot.
I have 3, and I feel like I'm drowning sometimes. So wow.
Right, yeah. Well, come on in. The water's fine. We have this thing where you walk by people and in the store or the hospital or wherever you are with the whole family, and you see people silently counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so it's a unique feeling. But I'm grateful. I've got a daughter and 6 boys, and so that the growth of that kind of was a tremendous stressor on my life that allowed me to grow in ways that I didn't anticipate. But as I continued on, I came to a realization that I needed to do a better job of actually making disciples. I was collecting attenders, but I wasn't making disciples. And that realization really shook me, and I hope raised my eyes to a different place. To a different level of what God wanted to do in my life. So I started thinking about this and trying to cast around, think about how do I make disciples from day one so that I can capture that fruit of when someone prays and someone's seeking and surrendering their life to the Lord. How do I capture that fruit? So I was at a funeral out of town, preaching at a funeral, and whenever I'm at a church, I automatically go to that church's little foyer and find whatever material they're passing out and ethically steal all their stuff.
There you go.
So
it's called research.
It's research. That's exactly right. So I pick up copies of everything that they're giving out to people. And I found this 1-page, like New Christian Bible reading plan. It's a 50-day Bible reading plan that kind of hit the highlights of the Bible. And I was like, oh, that is really good. I need to do something like this. So I stuck it in my laptop case and then drove home after that funeral and promptly forgot about it, and it languished in my laptop case, crushed by my laptop for like 6 months.
Wow.
And because I'm a small church pastor with 7 kids, and that's the way my life goes. So one day I was cleaning out my laptop case, pulled it out and saw it, and I don't know, it was just crushed down to this little squashed scrap of paper, and I opened it up and I just had one of those your day has come sort of moments, like, you know what, I'm going to do this. And I thought I was going to do so many months ago. And I sat down, I thought, okay, so I'm going to make this Bible reading plan. And then I thought, what if there was more than a Bible reading plan? What if there was some way to make this into a real discipleship journey that made it really bite-sized? And so I started adding stuff to it and a video explanation and made it into a tool for my church. And so that's been something that we've really enjoyed as a church, and it has been neat. So
that's cool. Okay, I want to talk about that tool, but there are 3 threads I need to go back and pull on, Dale. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right, number 1. Got them numbered here on my very organized notes. Number 1, you mentioned you had these dreams, these plans, and one of the things that you had to do is get past the surrender and the pain of that. Dive into that process for you. What did it look like to actually surrender those plans and those dreams and move forward in confidence?
Those are really challenging moments when suddenly you realize that what you thought was going to do, the way you thought it was going to go, isn't the way it's going. And I struggled with the idea that maybe the Lord didn't have in mind exactly the same growth trajectory for my church that I had when I was in Bible college. And I remember a time specifically in Bible college where I had prayed and felt like the Lord was saying to me, Darrell, if I called you to go not to a big church, which is where I wanted to pastor, but if I called you to go to a little country church and pastor 20 farmers for the rest of your life and make sure they got to heaven, would you be okay with that?
Wow.
And I said, I struggle with that because that's not me. That's not who I am in many ways. And I said yes. And I felt like all my little dreams, had kind of crumbled down. And then I felt like the Lord started picking up those pieces and saying, now let's make something out of this. Let's put something back together like this. And I feel like the same thing. You know how it is when you learn a lesson once and then you think you've got it, and then you have to learn it all over again 2 or 3 years later.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes, that same exact kind of thing where I felt like it was kind of coming apart again. And I wanted to do what the Lord wanted me to do, but at the same time, I wanted what Darrell wanted. And so it was a painful time of yielding some things and cutting some things away in my life and giving up some dreams. But when I did that, I found that just like Jesus said, when we lay down our life, we find it. And I laid down those dreams that I thought were my life, and I found a different kind of life and a different quality of life with the Lord. And I'm truly grateful. He's given me happiness in what He's called me to do. And that's what I love about ministry, is that I can be happy with what the Lord's asked me to do.
Yeah.
We have a friend who wrote a book called Stalled, Hope and Help for Pastors Who Thought They'd be there by now. I think you just described it. It's the dynamic of having to lay down what you think. Well, it's really this simple. I discovered a long time ago that when the Lord gives you a dream, the first thing He does is kill it.
Wow.
It's Abraham and Isaac. It's like, okay, the child of promise, the whole deal. Now lay it on the altar. And according to Hebrews, it says that figuratively speaking, he took him back from the dead.
Yeah.
Because the Lord wants to fill that dream. You see, the mistake is when we think it's our dream. It's not our dream. It's his dream for our life. And once we figure that out, then once he takes something that's been resurrected, then he can really do what he's doing in you today. And so it's just fun. It's fun to sit on this side and go, wow, there's somebody else who walked the same journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you also mentioned you got to a place in your leadership where you were just kind of defeated, it sounds like, but were, really struggling with pornography and I'm sure other things in your life. And that's not an uncommon struggle for pastors. I think it was last year I wrote an article about my own struggle with pornography and found statistics that between 60 and 70% of pastors struggle with porn, and at least half of pastors don't have anyone that they are accountable to, like that they talk to that stuff about. Crazy statistics.
Oh, I think it's higher than that.
I know. I think actually it's like 70 to 80% of pastors, as I was thinking about it. But
up there.
Yeah, crazy statistics there. So it's not uncommon. And there are, 60 to 70% of people listening are probably struggling with that at some level. So for you, two questions is one, how did you get to that place in your leadership? It may have been an old struggle that kind of like came back. And then two, what did you do to get whole, or are you whole? I guess is the second part of that.
Sure. Well, you're right. First of all, that's a huge struggle. And it used to be that you had to go to a particular place and go into an establishment and ask for the magazines behind the counter and face somebody. And now it's not that way at all. It's completely anonymous and utterly available. And so I did struggle deeply with that. What I discovered was, along with about, millions of other hundreds of thousands of other pastors, is that my eyes and my mind were not trained for the ready availability. I just wasn't aware. And I got high-speed internet, and it rocked my world. Because all of a sudden I'm pretty smart with computers and I know how to cover my tracks, and it was not a good situation. And so I think that at a certain point, it was actually right about the time that the church kind of started to grow and things were feeling pretty good. Right. So things were moving forward. We had some people that left the church, and then all of a sudden things kind of took off, and it was busy and it was heady times. Your things are going well and people are coming to church, and I had never felt that feeling before. And in the middle of that, I don't know really if I got just distracted or arrogant, or if the devil was just taking advantage of it to try to stymie what the Lord wanted to do. But whatever it was, I was not ready for the advent of all of those tools in my life. And as wonderful as technology is, if you're not able to deal with it in that kind of way, if you're not ready to bring those tools in your life and handle them responsibly, it can be an incredible downfall. Technology is an amplifier. A lot of times tech gets the bad reputation, but the truth is it's only an amplifier. If you are lustful, you can be 1,000 times more lustful. If you are encouraging, you can be 1,000 times more encouraging. But if you're angry, you can be 1,000 times more angry. So technology just takes what you are and multiplies it. And so it kind of exposed something in my heart that I really wasn't fully aware of, but the Lord allowed me to struggle with that and eventually see what was really going on. And I started thinking and analyzing and got honest about it. And so I say, as long as it was back in a dark corner of my life, it grew in power. If I kept it back in that dark closet of my life, it grew in strength and power. But when I started dragging it out into the light, kicking and screaming, it started to die. And that's what I started telling people. And that's when honestly, I think was probably the first step to wholeness, was recognizing that this is an actual problem and I'm not in control of it anymore. And secondly, I started telling people and told an accountability partner, told my wife. Those were incredibly painful conversations, but they were the first step to wholeness. So if there was somebody listening here and it's a secret, I would just tell you, start by admitting that you're not in control of it anymore. And then go start telling somebody that you can trust. And yes, those will be incredibly painful conversations, and there will be tears, and there will be hurt, and there will be difficult days, but that's the pathway toward healing. And it's the only one that I know.
Yeah.
Well, the word says, confess your faults to one another.
It does.
That you could be healed. So
Right.
how's your wife doing with all this?
The Lord has given her incredible grace. I sat down with her one night, and it was not the first conversation, but it was, several conversations into this. And she asked, and I told her I would always tell the truth if she asked. And I said, no, I haven't done well. And she said, okay, I want to talk about it, and I want to know why. Why is it so powerful? Why is it, what is it? And I said, do you have time for this, and you really want to hear? And she said, yeah. So we talked for 2 or 3 hours about the People magazine when I was 12, and about the National Geographic, and about, you understand all of that dynamic and that journey, things that I had never dealt with myself back when I was younger. And I got to this place and this point, and came up to the modern day, and she listened, and she loved me, and she prayed for me. And I saw in that a picture of God's grace, and it made me love him more, and it made me love her more. And I am incredibly, I'll never stop being overwhelmed and grateful by the grace that she showed me at that moment. And together we have worked on it, and together we have overcome. And I am living in wholeness, and I am living in victory. And I'm truly, truly grateful for that. So if there's guys out there, hey, understand that there's something on the other side of that struggle. Be willing to walk through it.
Yeah.
Did she have anyone she could reach out to for help? You had your accountability buddy, and honestly, there are resources now available to help pastors to work through this. But I always think, and I always dive into this one, but I just always am concerned about, okay, so you talked to her, you shared with her, you kind of had a breakthrough, or you had a breakthrough, but who helped her?
She had some friends. She did talk to a counselor for a little while, and that has kind of come back from time to time. There's been some struggles with depression, things like that we've worked through. And I wish I could say I had done a better job of pointing her to resources, because you're right. In those days, this was early in my ministry. In those days, there really wasn't a lot even for pastors. It was still so fresh. It was still such a brand new challenge that the tools weren't always out there. And so now there are a lot more for pastors. And I hope that there's an environment that's coming together for pastors' wives as well to help them. However, I would just say, if there's a pastor's wife, if there's a pastor who's trying to figure out how to help his wife, talking to a Christian counselor is absolutely important and is needed. And there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes we have this imaginary thing like, oh, if I talk to a counselor, something's wrong with me and I'm weird and I have to have psychotherapy. No, you sometimes you need somebody to walk through this with. It's not weird.
We all need psychotherapy.
Yeah,
it's really true. Yeah. It's not that weird, like lay down on the couch and I'm going to talk to you about your dreams anymore thing. There's real tools and real help by real people. And so call and talk to a counselor. That's not weird. It's important.
Yeah.
Well, I know we need to segue into why we actually had you on, but I'm so thankful when the Lord takes the conversation where he wants it to go. And I do want to interject even right now that if you are listening to this and you're going, that's me, I'm struggling, please reach out to us, because we have got some ministry partners, some strategic partners, some connections of people who can really help you if you're struggling with this. So I just wanted to interject that thought in, even as we talk about this. But I know Austin's still got his thread he wants to pull there.
Well, the third one here is that it'll move us in the right direction. But before I ask that, I did just want to say, Darrell, we just met you, but we're really proud of you for taking that step. And
thank you.
Proud of you. It's rare for people to be willing to have those conversations. And just like you said, it's literally, it's the only way to become whole.
How old are you? Darrell, how old are you?
I'm 40 years old.
Okay. So he's 40. See, I just turned 59. in my era, if I had gone through what you went through in my era, I'd been done, because there was no one you could talk to. There was nowhere to turn, and you couldn't talk to people in your church. You couldn't talk to people outside your church. There was just nothing available back then. And the stigma, and see, here's the thing I want to make sure we understand. So if you're leading a ministry, because you may be thinking, Darrell's got this ministry and it's successful, why would he fall into that? Look, when we as human beings are overstressed, in the Christian world, we're not supposed to do the porn thing or have affairs or the alcohol drug thing, but we eat fried chicken. I mean, the reality is this: you have to deal with that stress in some way, and it's not just because you're doing poorly. You just said you are actually at a new level of success. Yeah. But the reality is when we get our eyes on anything but Jesus is when it happens. And so I just want to encourage you today. There is so much help available now that even didn't exist in my day. And honestly, even when you were going through yours, it wasn't as prevalent as it is now. But there is help and there's hope, and you don't have to keep living, bound.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. This last thread that I wanted to pull on here is, you said that you noticed that you were collecting attenders and not just. What does that really mean? What did that mean for you to notice that? And then we can kind of move into this tool that you developed.
Yeah, everybody has reasons for coming to your church. Even if, as you collect people and your congregation, your attenders start growing, everybody has reasons for coming. And it might be everything from the guy who's just there because his wife dragged him there, to the person who's there because you're the only church in their immediate area that they theologically agree with, or they like, some people, it's like they like you because of your music, or they like you because of your personality, or they think you're a good preacher or whatever. And all of those are fine on the way in. But at some point, you got to move past collecting people that have gathered around you for that set of reasons. And you've got to move to deepening those people so that there's a common commitment to Christ, because that's what discipleship is. Nobody gets discipled by being committed to me. Nobody gets discipled by thinking Darrell is a worthwhile preacher. They get discipled when they learn to turn their heart and turn their eyes to the one that I'm supposed to point them to, and they commit their life to following him. And so and they learn to obey him. They learn to live in his presence and with him and speak with him and learn from his word. When that happens, that's discipleship. And so to me, I realized I was collecting attenders who were here, but many of them were here for different reasons. And some better and some worse, but they were all here for other reasons. And I wanted to get them transitioned to where they're here because of Jesus.
Well, it's just the residue of, and I'm not knocking this, but we had the seeker movement, and then we still are in the latter throes of the attractional focus, and we do need to be attractional. But the problem is the attraction and the seek often was about the person doing the communicating, and somehow and then we created, in some cases, pastors who were not healthy, who needed that platform to feed their own, issue, whatever it was. And so I say this term and it's offensive to some people in churches, but most churches are about entertainment. Now, what they think is when it's the church with the light and the haze and the band. No, there's a lot of people who go to a very traditional, quiet, reserved service, or more of an, liturgical service. It's still about the way you want to do your thing.
Like they go because they enjoy it.
Yes, it's because it's how I want it, and that's how you kind of get off track there. And so it's really cool that you kind of nailed that down in this approach that you come up with.
Yeah. Were you going to say something, Darrell?
Well, I was going to say, I think that ultimately we have to turn ourselves and get our people to turn their eyes past a style or a communicator, because you are correct. You can idolize a style with smoke and mirrors, or you can idolize a style with hymn books and whatever else. It's really about turning your eyes to what that style, to what all of those styles theoretically should point us toward, and that is a commitment to Christ and following him. And so to me, that's what discipleship is learning to obey Christ and be like Christ in everything. And so that's the goal I want to get people toward.
Yeah. Okay. This is going to sound like a stupid question, but I want to ask it anyways. What is the real practical difference in results from your perspective of a church of attenders compared to a church of disciples? Like, what really changes?
So a church of attenders it gathers and is there because they are committed to the joy of whatever it is that they're gathering around, or the drudgery of whatever it is they're gathering around. If it's the guy he's there because his wife dragged him. Yeah. But a church of disciples is gathered around the person and the work of Jesus, and being when they're together in the church, they are gathered together around the person and the work of Jesus. When they scatter out into the world, they realize that they're the hands and feet of Jesus and the eyes of Jesus and the mouth of Jesus in their world. And so I think that the difference is that one of them promotes, that a church of attenders promotes a particular place or a pastor, and a church of disciples goes out to just be Jesus in their community and to represent him.
Yeah. What questions would you ask a pastor to identify which one their church is?
Wow, that's a good question. So if you sat down and you wondered, you thought through, why are the different people in my church? So a lot of small church pastors probably listen to this, and their churches are, 100 or whatever, 150, 75. Yeah. You have a list of people, and you can kind of see their faces. You know where they generally sit because we always sit in the same places, right?
Absolutely.
So you can kind of see in your mind, you see where they sit. Why are they here? Well, that person's here because their wife brought them. That person is here because they like me. That person, and you kind of walk through. And if you took a little inventory, if your church is 1,000, it would be a little more difficult. But if your church is small, you can kind of take inventory, and you can get a feel for where people are, because you probably know, you've been around them for a while, and you probably know where they are and why they're there. And if you find that a lot of them are not there, they're there for another reason besides learning how to obey Christ and be Jesus in the world. If they're not there for that reason, then you don't have a church built of discipleship.
That's good. All right.
Really good.
Let's talk about New Start Discipleship.
So before you do that, I just want to make sure Darrell knows this. So Darrell, there's an old hymn that all of those people who sit in the same seat, that it's their favorite hymn, and I wanted to make sure you knew it. It's called "I Will Not Be Moved." So I just want to make sure you knew that.
It sounds familiar. Yeah, I think I've heard it.
There's a deeper meaning there. Yeah.
Right.
So tell us a little bit more. You kind of hinted at it before. You had stuck this kind of booklet of 50 days at the beginning of your journey, and you wanted to create something similar. And so let's talk a little bit about what that turned into, and even how people can get access to it and check it out. So tell us a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah. So I decided to develop this little one-sheet brochure, one-page brochure that was a Bible reading plan into something that would help people, because many times I've had people that they prayed and they sought the Lord, and then I had these plans like, I'm gonna disciple this person, I'm gonna get them going, and then what I did is I went out with them, took them out to lunch or got pizza or stopped by their house. And I found that I was just inventing every time. I'm always recreating the wheel, and I'm always reinventing just every single time. The bottom line is I was winging it. I was flying by the seat of my pants.
Yep.
I didn't have a standard plan. And that the fact that I didn't was costing me, because it was costing creative energy. It was costing me having to think of the same things every single time. Yeah. So I love systems because they help me do valuable work in expected ways. And so I decided I'm going to create a system for the first couple of months of a brand new Christian's life. So I said, what if I created this Bible reading plan? And then I started, other questions started coming. What else does a new Christian need in the first 50 days? What habits would put them in a good place for the rest of their Christian life or for the next stage.
Yeah.
And so I started creating this little booklet, and I actually have a copy here in my hand. So so I put together day 4 is Matthew 5 and 6 is the Bible reading for that day. And so then I put an empty slot where like what I noticed in today's scripture reading, because I want them interacting with the scripture, right? That's another, not just reading it and enclosing their Bible, but interacting with it. What's something that I noticed? What's something that the Holy Spirit is highlighting to me out of today's reading? And then I want them asking questions and connecting with a mentor. So I put a section in here. What's a question I have about today's scripture reading that I could ask my mentor? And then I put an empty slot. What's something I'm thankful for today? Because I think Zig Ziglar, the old motivational speaker, was right when he said gratitude is the healthiest human emotion. If we can be thankful for something, it helps us get out of depression. It helps us stave off anxiety. It helps us become more grateful and happy people. So I put in, here's something I'm thankful for. And then what is something that I want God to help me with today? And I left that gap in there. And then I put a sample prayer in. So every page has a little QR code that you can scan where it takes you to a 5-minute video that explains that day's Bible reading, because we live in a day where the world is not very aware of what the Bible means. It's kind of a mystery. It's a black box to them. And so every day, a 5-minute video that helps explain that day's Bible reading. And then just going through a sample prayer and a meditation question. So those are some of the features that I put together as I brainstormed this out, and it turned into this little spiral bound booklet, 50-page thing that works for our church. And like I said a minute ago, I've got 7 kids, and they're all getting older. My daughter's 17, and I've got 6 boys, and they are growing and they eat a lot. And so I told my wife, being that we're a small church pastor and that we need an assistant pastor, I don't think I need to go to the church board and say, I need a pay raise right now. I think maybe I should just package this and make it available to other pastors. And so, by the way, nothing wrong with a side job, right? Paul made tents. So if there are pastors out there,
we recommend it. I think there's a lot of healthy reasons why it takes the pressure off the church. It takes the pressure off the leader. And honestly, you can't keep living below the poverty line, especially you with, you got 4,000 kids. I mean, you got
4,000. Yeah.
You got to feed, you have 6 girls, you got 6 boys. So just feeding them, you probably have to go out and hunt 3 months out of the year just to survive, So having a job on the side, I think there's just a lot of good reasons to do that, especially in the small church setting.
You're right.
Very healthy.
Yeah.
So that's what New Start Discipleship, that's kind of how it came about. And then I did it for me. It's one of the things I think is cool about it is I didn't package this up like, oh, maybe I can make a business, but I started by doing something that was for me and for my church and to help my new believers. So that's why I care about it, not because it's a side job, but because I want to do well with my people. Man, if we disciple well, it would change the world in 1 or 2 generations.
Yeah.
Discipleship's always it's just a buzzword,
Yeah.
It is. And, it really shouldn't be that way. Leroy Ames in his book, The Lost Art of Disciple Making, says that if one person started and said, I'm going to disciple somebody, and every year they discipled one person, and they managed to make it possible for that one person to start discipling one other person. So every year it just doubled. Are you guys familiar with the term geometric progressions? You know what a geometric progression is, right? It's like one of those graphs. I'm trying to describe it for the podcast, but it's like one of those graphs where it starts off really slow growth, and then all of a sudden it curves and gets super steep over at the one end of the graph, where it's like exploding exponential growth. And if one person decided they wanted to disciple one person, and every year they just added a new one, and their next generation added one person. So every year it just doubled. Do you guys have any clue how long it would take to reach the entire world?
I feel like I've heard this stat before.
It's not long.
It's not. Yeah.
It's like 35 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll put it like this. At the end of year 21, you would hit 1 million.
Wow.
But the problem is everybody wants to be in the later years of that progression, and nobody wants to do this year, which is 1.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would just encourage pastors out there to do something, to grab hold of this and be like, I am willing to be the pastor at the bottom end of that progression and to do 1 or 2. And if we really did that well, and we made it possible to do what Paul said, where he said, the things you've heard from me in the presence of other men, give to other faithful men who will be able to teach others also. So you're starting your discipleship with 2 or 3 generations of discipleship in view. So whatever you do has to be multiplied. Oh, okay. Anyway, I'll talk more about that. So I'll let you get to your next question.
No, keep going.
There's more to
No.
All right. So there's more to say here. Everything that you do has to be transferable.
Yeah.
If it isn't transferable, if it requires like proprietary knowledge, if your discipleship strategy requires a Bible college degree, you are never going to multiply disciple makers.
Amen.
If your discipleship strategy requires you to have a communications degree or be comfortable getting up in front of groups, you will never multiply disciple makers. You need to be able to disciple somebody who can sit down across a McDonald's, little table in the corner and pass it on to somebody else. And if it's not simple enough that they can do that, you're never going to multiply disciple makers in your church.
We do Chick-fil-A here.
Okay.
Yeah, come on.
That's a great point. Yes. And it would be more delicious and to sit down at that table. So
it's such a good point though. I mean, you're absolutely right. Like I think that has been one of the biggest barriers for years in churches, is just how complicated we try to make everything, because we feel like there's this bar of knowledge that has to exist. And we talk all the time, like, the disciples didn't even really know who Jesus was until he was gone. Like he was right there in front of them the whole time trying to teach him. And it just took them a while to really catch up. But through that process, they're still helping other people identify that and kind of experience in taking those steps. And so I completely agree. I love that word transferable. Just really kind of makes it click, I think, for a lot.
Yeah. If it's not transferable, it's not multipliable.
Yeah.
And so, so crucial. So that's part of the reason that I developed this resource, is because I love teaching the scripture. And I've been to Bible college and I've read the books and I've done the commentary work. But if I could make it possible for somebody to take somebody through this, and then all they would have to do is hand this to somebody else, hand a copy of New Start Discipleship Journal to somebody else and say, hey, I want to take you through this. My pastor took me through this. And all they would have to do is be an encouragement and talk to them and try to answer any questions that they had. They didn't have to have a whole bunch of proprietary knowledge. They can just pass it on and duplicate what I did with them. That would be huge. And so that's the reason I decided to put something together that could be multiplied.
Yeah. So is it just for new believers? You said it's New Start. It's the name of it. Is it just for?
So it's designed to be accessible for a new believer, for a brand new believer. But I am actually taking guys through this at my church that have been Christians for 3 years or something like that. It's not just a brand new believer thing. It's good for new believers. So if somebody gets saved at your church, I just ordered another 20 copies of this from my printer, and I put them on my shelf in my office. If somebody seeks the Lord and they're making a commitment to follow Christ, I want to get them back to my office and say, hey, come back here with me to my office real quick. I am so excited that you're following Jesus. Welcome to the family. And now let me give you this right here. This is going to walk you through a bite-sized system for the next 50 days. If you miss a day, no big deal. Just pick up on the day you missed and where you left off. And it's going to walk you through the first 50 days. And it's going to explain the Bible reading to you and make it possible for you just to really learn what it's about to follow Jesus. So it's good for that. But I also, when I launched this, I took my whole church through it. I gave out 100 copies to everybody, everybody every adult or every teenager in the church. And then I preached a sermon series that went along with it, which, by the way, people can get if they subscribe. But it's all that stuff, all the video resources and PowerPoints and sermon handouts and all of that goes along with it. But the New Start journal, I gave a copy to everybody. And then I printed a whole bunch of new ones so that if people want to pass it on, they can do that. And so the other thing is that I want people this to be something where I can not just have everybody call me as their mentor, but I can take Bryce through it, who I'm going through. I went through it with recently, and I can take Bryce through it, and then I can hand him a copy and say, Bryce, this is Bill, and Bill just became a Christian. I would like for you to be Bill's mentor. You guys are from a similar background, and you've both struggled with the drug thing. Would you be Bill's mentor and take him through this? And that way it multiplies, right? Now Bryce is the guy who feels spiritually responsible to take somebody through that.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Where do people find this resource?
So it has a website that, of course, that goes along with it. Everything is built up on a website, and it works with QR codes. By the way, whatever your discipleship plan, you're only going to get so far with fighting how people consume information in the 21st century. So you got to build a discipleship plan that will work for people that are techie, as well as those who aren't. So every day has a QR code, and they can scan all of those things. But there's a site that they can go to. In fact, would you guys mind if I just gave everybody a free downloadable copy that's listening to the podcast? Okay,
no, we don't like to give away free stuff.
We no way, no free resources.
Okay, all right. So if you go to 95podcast.newstartdiscipleship.com, so you literally just type in that. I don't know if you guys have show notes or links or whatever,
we do.
But 95podcast.newstartdiscipleship.com. If you type that in your browser, it will actually take you to a little landing page where you can put in your email address and download. I'll email you a free copy of it and tell you more about it. In fact, there's several other free resources. That one-page list that I talked about, one-page Bible reading plan, I'll email that to you in the first few days and things. So
the crumpled up one?
Yeah.
The crumpled up one. No, you don't get the one that
around.
Yeah. You get the one that I fixed and made it look better. And cool. So, yeah. And I also, in the first few days when people subscribe to my email list, in the first few days, I also send them a PDF that really gives several steps that I used to make my own. There may be people who are like, hey, I want to build my own. That's great, man. The more discipleship resources we have out there, the better. So if you want to build your own, go do that. And I give you some really just like a process, or here's some questions you need to ask. Here's the thoughts you need to have. Here's the kind of resource that I would recommend that you develop. So I give away that a free PDF about that too. So 95podcast.newstartdiscipleship.com.
Hey, well, we love free tools. So you guys go check that out. Awesome. Like he said, you can type that in, or it'll be in the show notes for this episode. We didn't even know he was doing that. So that's pretty sweet. But anyways, Darrell, this has been delightful. It has been a lot of fun. So thank you so much for just taking your time to share a little bit about your journey and about this new tool. And it's just been really great to meet you. So I appreciate you doing this. Thanks, Austin and Dale. I really appreciate the chance to come on and talk about it. Ultimately, if there's small church pastors out there that are encouraged by something we've said today, that's what it's about. I love these guys. Yep. These guys are my heroes, and so many of them working hard and doing the hard work and fighting through discouragement and temptation and all of that, and staying faithful. And they're my heroes. I wish I could go and shake every one of their hand right now, but Let's do this then to wrap up today. Share with them a word of encouragement. Or if you were with them face to face, what would you tell them? Yeah. What you do matters more than anything else in the world. If God has called you to be a small church pastor, don't come down from that place to be president of the United States. God is so faithful, and he's so overjoyed at what you're doing. The scripture says that like he will sing over his people, right? God sings and he celebrates over you. What you do is so crucial to the kingdom of God. You're doing work that is more valuable than the biggest Fortune 500 companies that are out there. And so keep it up. Don't quit. If you are discouraged, you're down, reach out to somebody and find somebody to talk to. Don't quit what you're doing. Don't walk away. I know there's so many guys that are emotionally overwhelmed with the pandemic and all that right now, but don't
quit. Just reach out and find somebody to talk to. And if you need to, take a break. Dale, I want to say just a huge kudos to you for taking a sabbatical. If you need to, take a break, but don't quit. What you do matters deeply.
Amen.
Thanks for listening to the 95 Podcast. We look forward to sharing another episode with you next week. In the meantime, visit our website at 95network.org. The website is loaded with great resources created for small and mid-sized church leaders. Until next time, have a great week.